Good afternoon. Welcome to this afternoon session of the 11th ENISE, with a very interesting timing that we're having. Somebody has to speak after lunch. So I have 4 great speakers and representatives of the industry, and we are at home. We feel at home, and at least I am at home. This is an easy moment to address the topic we have today, the evolution of cyber threats. This is the WannaCry year, the discovery of vulnerabilities that we thought were going to have an important repercussion last week. I think we were all shocked with VPA2, though this was corrected afterwards, and speedily by all parties involved, by all stakeholders. But these are small events, facts that take their place in a log of cybersecurity. And this is a wide spectrum, and that's what gives us a position to analyze the evolution of cyber threats from the point of view of the industry, of manufacturers of solutions for cybersecurity. In order to have an interesting session and as lively as possible and as dynamic as possible, we will have just a small introductory address by the different speakers, and then we would like to have a discussion with you. So first, I'll give the floor, without any further ado, to José Ramón Díaz, who is responsible of cybersecurity, governmental cybersecurity for Symantec. Good afternoon, everyone. First, we would like to thank you for inviting the industry to share this session with you. This morning we had sessions of people and processes, and now we are going to speak about technology. As an introduction, I wanted to update you on cybersecurity trends. I'm going to just speak about user vectors. That's the most important part for us, and then we can analyze campaigns, cyber attacks, cybercrime, etc. But we have 3 vectors as users: email, navigation or browsing, and endpoint. And I'll give you some figures of the past 3 months. So these are updated details to September. For emails, I do not have any good news to share. Malware is increasing once again. We have an increase in the number of malware pieces per email pieces. 1 out of 312 is malware as an attachment or a link, and for example, phishing attacks. Spam is maintained, stays stable at 50% of spam in the world, and that's a figure that's stable, and that's a decrease in phishing attacks. Only 1 out of 2,700 emails is phishing. For the second vector, there aren't any good news either. We can identify browsing, user browsing, and there are 2 aspects here. One has to do with attacks. This is not new, but the percentage of attacks coming through encrypted sessions with AGLS is increasing on a day-to-day basis, and we just have to tell you that not intercepting incoming traffic is not an option. And the incoming browsing traffic. And in browsing, another thing that's not too recent, but is slightly new. In the past 3 months, we've seen that there are websites hosting with encrypted websites. They're being used for 2 things. One of them, to download malware, links where the software piece has infiltrated, and they link to safe URLs, and they download malware, malicious pillbots, and then the websites that are used to filter information, to leak information. So we have Dropbox, Evernote, to upload sensitive information that has been compiled. Regarding endpoint as the third vector, there are so many new things here. We have WannaCry, and the May and June campaigns. We have complex problems We have machines that have to be patched properly, then machines we have to protect. We have malware, intelligent malware that tries to get obfuscated. And these are challenges. We have analysis for false systems, looking for files. That's not enough. They're useful, but they're not enough because most malware might be obfuscated in register keys, etc. This is the introduction that I wanted to share with you. Thank you very much, José Antonio, for being brief. Now Rosa Díaz, she's Director General of Panda Security Spain. Good afternoon. I'd like to thank INCIBE for their invitation to be here and share this roundtable with you. I'm not going to give as many details as José. I think that we were clear about what the industry looks like. I'd like to tell you that the moment we are in now is like a roller coaster. We do not know how far up you are, what is the path that's left, and you do not know how long you'll have to descend. We were present in some of the tables this morning, and we could hear how in this moment of digital transformation, how the surface of exposure is increasing, and how we really have to balance and how we have to analyze our business and to see that it is security measures that we're going to be using. We, as producers and manufacturers, you know that we are very strong in endpoint. There are several studies indicating that it is the endpoint that's suffering all the attacks. And we speak about attacks and malware, but malware is just a small share of the time we're in. We're suffering theft, information theft, and these are troubled times in which malware is a problem. I think all of us present here are aware of this. But with different techniques, we're trying to face it. And what I wanted to share with you in this first intervention is that what we, the Panda Security Lab, is seeing is that how attacks are growing when there aren't files attached, and attacks when we take advantage of, or we get the administrator credentials, we go into the system, we move around the network silently. We get the information we're interested in, and we leave. And that's what we're seeing now with the technologies we're working with. And this is a far more complex part, because when we speak about an attack such as Petya or WannaCry, they encrypt the files. These are the attacks we are aware of. But of course, there's a large share of theft and infiltration that we will not know, for example, Equifax, until we see it in the news. So we know that this is a moment in which we need to have different skills to defend ourselves, but I also wanted to speak about visibility. This sector, I many times say that we are product-centric, but we know that security cannot be ensured 100%, but we really need to have tools that give us visibility and that we know what happened with the attack, where did it go through, and to have traceability to know what has happened, and then to have measures in place and risk analysis so that this doesn't happen again. And Elena, I'll leave it here, and we can continue with the rest of the panelists. Thank you. Josep Albors is responsible for information and awareness programs of ESET Spain. Thank you very much for allowing me to be here, first of all. As the person responsible for research, I've been working for 12 years in the industry, analyzing malware, and I'm far more concerned about something than the threats we see now. The threats that have been working for 20 years are still working as well as they did in the past, because there's somebody who opens an email, still somebody who clicks on a link, and somebody who opens a file, which they don't have any reason to open the file, and it works as well for criminals as it did 20 years ago. There's a problem with awareness, and neither the companies are taking this responsibility into account, nor are the users trained, because we're always very full of ourselves saying that the weakest link is the user. But who has trained the user? Who has shown the person who is fighting with hundreds of emails every day? Who has told them, okay, be careful, because maybe one day you'll get an email that's not what it looks like. They try to cheat you, and they want you to give information that's confidential, and you have not been trained, so you don't know that. There are, of course, threats that are more advanced, but they are a negligible percentage if we compare it with the threats that are constantly being recycled, and they use vector attack vectors that I'm ashamed to recognize this, because they are vector attacks that we thought we were over with before. Having said this, if we are looking at advanced threats, we see that we have had resources by criminals to generate more complex malware that's more difficult to analyze, and even malware that is works against the security solutions that we develop our companies. It takes time. Our labs take time to analyze malware, locate the origin, try not to have false flags, and to protect users who trust our solutions. Where does this lead us to? This leads us to a critical point. If we do not stop this junk that we're receiving every day, and it still causes a lot of problems. And I have to mention again WannaCry. Have you thought about this? WannaCry, May 12th. If we analyze it from a technical point of view, WannaCry is a ransomware bad job. They couldn't even retrieve the files when you had paid. And the only novel they had was a security hole that was patched a month back, and they knew for 3 months that this was happening. Is this an advanced threat? I'm sorry, but I have to disagree with the definition. Of course, we do have advanced threats, and we see it in directed attacks, as targeted attacks for countries. For example, what happened in Ukraine. They've been threatened by their neighbors, or this is at least what it's alleged. It was difficult to prove. So from the point of view of somebody who's been analyzing malware for many years, of course there has been an evolution. We've moved from something that was simple to something that's more complex. But for a regular criminal, even somebody who's not aware of programming and they just get malware as a service, it's as easy to infect user now as it was in 1999. Thank you very much, Josep, for your critical and clear point of view. And finally, I'll give the floor to Iván Mateos, who is a pre-sales sales engineer for Spain and Portugal for Sophos. As my colleague said, thank you very much for having us here. And I love the way you asked the question, because you mentioned two things, WannaCry and Petya ransomware, that seemed advanced and special, but as Josep was saying, in the end, they weren't as advanced as they looked. They were just reused techniques. WannaCry was just a mere worm. The difference was how it spread it. And Petya, instead of ciphering the files, they changed the register, and you couldn't start your machine. We were familiar with this. They weren't so different. Of course, we have advanced threats and new techniques, but in the end, we have to see the different vectors and factors, and we do not need to be up to date to the last minute to control this. You also mentioned data leak, Equifax, and there we also have a way to cut across that is about encryption and CBDR. I think we may need to have some more encryption to safeguard our data. And then VPA2 is a system that revolutionized the world. And many people didn't know that this could be solved. We know that most manufacturers have patched this in a short period of time. Others have decided not to patch it. That's their own decision. But in the end, what I see is that Internet, or security in itself, Internet is an unsafe environment, there are many layers we need to work upon. We do not just need to have a single solution, an anti-malware solution, or a single firewall, or a single solution to encrypt all the information. So we need to see security from the point of view of different layers, having a solution that allows us to control each layer independently. And on top of that, if those layers can talk to each other and communicate in a synchronized way, then we'll have an additional security layer. So as Rosa was saying, this is not just about protecting yourself. You need to see how the threat has entered, who has been the target, and we need to provide follow-up and look at the origin of the threat. Because many times we've spent a lot of time, a user has spent a lot of time to have a safe platform and environment, and then we have a user who loves opening emails to see what's in them, and they love going to all the links, and that's our problem. And maybe it was as simple as having a report of what happened in our last attack and say, you are going to need some training, and you'll need to distinguish between good emails and malicious emails. So it's not just talking about security systems, but we need to train users. We need to have visibility to look for the origin. So in my view, we need to have an environment of different security layers, and we should be going through each of the pathways. Thank you very much, Iván. And your words have contextualized the first question I'd like to ask you, all of you. We're analyzing, each of us giving our opinion regarding the evolution of cyber threats. And we have threats that are going to develop more or less. And we have hackers or professionalization of hacking that may be more or less brilliant. But the role of manufacturers is also developing. And if we do not see this development and the techniques of the cyber attack, we do have a problem in this roller coaster. We have a period in which we have to see how we can develop our own solutions, our own strategies, to go beyond and to be faster or come at least at the same time in detecting new threats. So you were mentioning the difficulties of silent threats, security breaches or failures that are already in the system, and we not really know that they're there until they're found a long time afterwards. So for you, what is the most important challenge for detection? To find a strategy that covers, that goes through all the different points of view in a more comprehensive approach. Who would like to start? This is an open discussion, so you can take the floor in whichever order you like. Okay, there are many names for it. One of them is flying below the radar. That's one of the techniques. Since mid-2016, since August, there's a new technique that has to do with this, and it is basically, it's an odd word, and living off what the earth gives me. What does this mean? It means that you have a zero DI. It's more complex and more expensive. So the evil guys, the bad guys, instead of investing their money and their time in trying to buy or develop artifacts, they use whatever is available in my system. So they either use components of my system that are benign. We are not trying to find vulnerabilities. What we're going to try is to use them to do stuff. And the data we have so far in terms of new attacks below the radar, we have some significant details. We have, for example, elements in any Windows system that are being used frequently for cyber attacks. These components are PowerShell and WMD. The number of malware pieces that these techniques use has grown exponentially. And this is a complex event because WMI is a component, a systems component that is used for the update of the operating system. So one of the things, and you cannot uninstall it. So one of the things manufacturers have to face is how to protect system tools that are part of the system. We're used to protecting ourselves from specific tools that were ad hoc, that were specifically developed for an attack. But now we have attacks where they are using the tools of the system. So this is one of the challenges we have to face. I think that in line with what we were saying, I think that the challenge for manufacturers today is to detect the unknown, basically. We know that we'll have a threat tomorrow. We are not sure what this is going to look like, and we know that it will make the best of a known vulnerability. But we do know how this has worked in the past, how this usually happens, how it usually spreads, and what we can do with our experience, in my opinion. Like, of course, the bad guys have started using advanced technology. I think that you had a discussion in the other room about artificial intelligence. They've started using artificial intelligence, and that they have used learning tools that can mutate to avoid protection schemes. Then we also have to do that. If they have invested in technology to make things work for them, then we also have to invest and make technology work and be at least at the same level and have more intelligence in our solutions. They have to be ready without having a signature to recognize a threat, an existing threat. Through artificial intelligence or pattern recognition, we should be able to recognize a threat. I think that is the challenge for me. We should be ready to at least make things far more difficult for these guys, and that zero DI is not a problem. And we do not care whether you're going to exploit a vulnerability, because I know how you're going to do it. And if I see that you're doing something that's out of the ordinary, I'm going to stop it. Going back to what you said, a challenge that is important for me today is that the whole intelligence that we are gathering regarding the threats that we've witnessed, we need to manage this in a way that allows us to detect those attacks, not just a random attack, but also in an exploration phase until they start eating up memory, those malware that doesn't leave any files on your disk, or until they do not connect to their control system. We do not know that. But if you have an intelligence that there's a malware, if you have a behavior analysis and you see that some tools are being used and are legitimate in the system, and we've seen that for a while, we have to identify this, mark it, even if you do not know what this is called, just flag it as suspicious. And this has to be conveyed to somebody, for example, to the public administration or corporation. They have to show a flag. There's something suspicious there, and this is so critical that they have to pay attention. So endpoint solutions may not tell you that there's a malware of this family, but it will be shown as an activity that's trying to do something that's out of the ordinary, and always considering that this has to be avoided as much as possible, and we should not have false positives, because I think that that is bad if you have a false positive that makes all the systems inoperative, or a malware that is affecting the network. So this is one of the challenges, to manage the amount of intelligence that we're generating in security institutions, and that through some links and bonds that we have, we share intelligence, and those samples, we need to apply them in our solutions so that they are detected as new threats in the most practical way possible, without causing damage, or at least the lowest damage possible to our customers, and avoiding false positives. Yes, I agree. From our side, we really want to give companies tools that allow them to be safe. Apart from the noise of alerts, we need to have a balancing act. We should not get false positives all the time, alerts that are not relevant, but they help us visualize what we're doing. If you allow me, I'd like to, after the three of you have spoken, I'd like to share what we have done as a manufacturer. In our lab, we realized for some time ago that we had 200,000 samples every day. I'm sure that you also have the same thing, same figures. And at some point we heard We are not a company. We are based in Bilbao. We cannot grow in human resources as some other multinationals. So we really need to be efficient in the processes that we used. And what we decided, Bilbao style, was to classify the goodware and all the processes that are done in the park. So in the end, we have complete visibility of everything that's happening. And as this is classified, you let those processes run that are approved by us, and then you do continuous monitoring of a process that's goodware today, but tomorrow it can become malware or other type of attack. This has also allowed us for some time with artificial intelligence, and there were other talks in the other room, in the other hall, machine learning and contextual intelligence, so that we, with few workers, because of course we cannot compete as a company in terms of human resources with others, that we have a solution at the workplace to ensure processes that are being implemented. We must not forget that the mission of our companies is to supply these tools so that a third party can offer the service and the solution to the final customer. And this is an important part of our role as manufacturers. We need to see how we feel and where we are going to. No doubt, we're speaking about using technology and cutting-edge technology. We're all speaking about machine learning and artificial intelligence. And are we just evolving in the power of the tool, or are we facing the challenge, looking back to what we have as a slogan in ENISE, the challenges of a connected world, the challenges of new devices that are part of this connected world? Just very briefly, so that we can have some questions from the audience. But what are we doing with this? From Symantec, we're doing three things. They're not new. There was a session this morning where we had 4 sizes speaking about problems. In IoT and Symantec, we recommend an authentication of the devices. They have to be certified. The second aspect has to do with the frame of those devices. And this is what we have, for example, in banks and cash machines. And then the third aspect is anomaly detection. Those devices are there to do specific stuff, and if they're not doing it, it should be detected immediately. I'll just add that in RGPD is here to stay. Next May, this will also support us in security from design, so that these systems that we as individuals and as people are better protected, because sometimes we're scared about the future of all this. From the point of view of Sophos, we were speaking about IoT equipment, and I've heard that if we have 3,500, there's 14 million devices against the number of users. So it seems that the problem is not just about protecting the user, about what we call the endpoint, but we have so many devices, many more devices per user that are connected to internet. And that's a problem. So Android, iOS seems to be covered. That's an endpoint. There are also projects, at least from our side, to have an integration with Windows, ICOT. Well, there's a problem in terms of awareness and education. We cannot think that a producer is going to come and protect our device. Of course, they will come. They will have our security systems. They will check the incoming and outgoing connections. And finally, they will integrate this with other operational systems, smart TVs, etc. But we really have to create awareness that these for the equipment is also user equipment. They have to be set up, and if we can have the latest version of a camera that's connected online, but then we have a default password and everybody can see it. So we have to create awareness amongst users so that these are online devices, and we have to give them some information and training and see, oh, I do not just have 2 computers, but I have 6 pieces of equipment and they have to be protected, both in terms of privacy and recruiting through bots, etc. Equipment and OTs are an important tool that is being used by malware or attackers. And we didn't expect to have this, and we really need to work hard. The challenge of IoT, that's an important challenge, and it's so easy to see how bad this is important. How many of you have updated the firewall of your router and the TV? Yeah, raise your hand. Yeah, we are aware. But if you ask this in any other conference, then yes, we are always saying that people are not aware. So when are we going to say and be in a position to tell citizens, okay, go ahead? Yes, this is a problem. We really need to focus on creating awareness, and that this is not just for the users, but also goes up to manufacturers. There's a standard and there's a regulation where we have the same requirements, safety requirements, and update requirements and maintenance for a while. Because otherwise they say, oh, this device has run out, has expired, and we need to throw it out. And that's not sustainable. We do not have enough resources. But also from the point of view of safety, that's terrible. You have spoken about botnets. We see how crimes are using any kind of biotech devices, not just the fridges, everything, even toys we use for children. And this is problematic, and it will be worse if we look at the forecasts we heard this morning. In 2022, what did we say? 50,000 entry points to our information. How do we stop that? We cannot have an antivirus in all devices. As Symantec colleagues said, we can monitor connections, we can block, but still many things are going to be left unfiltered. So we have to go back to the root cause, and we have to sit with manufacturers and see, okay, if we cannot solve it at 100%, we have to mitigate the damage, or this will be worse. And that's a serious thing. And we should not think, oh, manufacturers are trying to sell more products. No, this is a problem that involves all of us, and criminals know about this, and we are making their job very easy. So that we get together, and organizations as INCIBE, manufacturers and legislators get together and agree on something, and we'll start putting pressure on manufacturers, or we will be here after 2 years talking about the same thing but with bigger problems. We have to trust what Rosa said before, that privacy through design is something that's making progress right now. Just apologize, but because we're running out of time, we just have a few minutes for the audience to take the floor. They have been very well behaved, and they didn't raise their hands. Do you have any questions?
Cuestión por ahí. Ya sabéis que puede ser una pregunta tanto a alguno de los.
You can ask your question to any one of the speakers or to all of them. Good afternoon. I'd like to thank the speakers for their presentations. You have given us a viewpoint that is not always obvious. I would like to ask a question. Blockchain and security, are they going to marry, or are they going to be permanently divorced? So, it's a tool which is out there, which enables many other opportunities, for better or for worse. So we cannot chastise the new technology just because a part of the users are using it the wrong way. If we simplify the blockchain, I jot down the register, it's kept there. I know who's sent it, who's made a register of it, when there's been a transfer of monies, and it can be used for other applications. For security, as artificial intelligence has been used for many years, and machine learning too, and it's been implemented properly. It didn't just pop up. but it has to be applied correctly. That's where the real challenge lies. To follow up on this, I think it must go hand in hand with security. The cryptocurrency part is very much criminalized, or that there's malware for this. But before there were cryptocurrencies, there was also fraud. Western Union was also used to swindle people. There were other means in the past. Now we have this means. It's criminalized, and some people say that if the Bitcoin coin is going to rise in its value, then there are many threats after that. But it's easier because people know the cryptocurrencies and they ask similar interesting questions. People have access to a currency that is difficult to trace, and so it's easy to blackmail with it. However, if the evolution is to go the way the cryptocurrencies are going, they will have to go hand in hand with security, and they ought to start getting their acts together to make this something useful. Do you have any other questions? Good afternoon. I agree totally with what you said about artificial intelligence, etc. You're talking all the time about software, malware. We have another topic out there, which is awareness. At the end of the day, well, some nodes use 1990s techniques. So what do you think, manufacturers like yourselves? Shouldn't you also get your act together, not only to detect malware, but also regarding awareness and detection of the means used by malware to achieve its goals? You mean attack vectors? Yes, all sorts of them, fake news, you name it. I wasn't here during the artificial intelligence session. It does give us a lot of advantages. It enables us to identify variables and samples, but it brings many challenges. There are some crackers that go straight to the drivers of artificial intelligence. Some of them are even services, such as the platforms of Amazon, and some of the bad guys are out there to interfere with the learning algorithms of the machines, and also to fake the data samples. And if you change 10% of the data in telemetry, you may change the algorithms and their eventual verdict. So artificial intelligence is okay, it's a necessary evil, but it does have its challenges too. If we are to carry on, we are working in artificial intelligence for many years now. The truth is that when we speak of technologies as antivirus for 30 years on the market, during the quality process, when I'm creating malware, at the last moment of the process, then we have to check it against all the antiviruses in the market, and as software, the antiviruses have ways of getting around them. So this goes back to what we said, the challenge that we propose. The evil guys are out there, and this is an important business, and the industry has to do as much as possible to create bridges for communication, because we have to help to make a better and safer world. It's very easy to say, but then when the time of truth comes, it's not so easy. So we have to make the most of new technologies to take a step further and help the world to be more secure. But there will always be someone who will try to bend the rules, and artificial intelligence is helping us to be more efficient, to be able to issue a verdict, and in order for the automatic rules to be learnt by themselves, and so that we may have a greater coefficient of security at the end of the day. This is something that we all ought to bank on, and I think we're doing it. I think that's the way to have a safer or more secure environment, and to have everything perfectly classified, and the verdict, which would be otherwise impossible to issue, because the antivirus will say that it's not known malware. Most of it is unknown. So either we find new technologies to approach that, or we will be one or several steps behind them. Yes, you're right, we have new technologies, we have new issues, we have new infrastructures that are challenging, and in a case we have the challenge of awareness. And I think that the approach that we can all have, and that we ought to all have, is also to treat not only the awareness of individual citizens, but also awareness amongst the manufacturers of any kind of device and of society overall. In any case, we don't have the time to carry on. Thank you very much for your interventions, for your presentations, and to the audience, of course, for their presence and participation too. Thank you very much.